Alright, here we go. A little disturbed. Down with the sickness. In celebration of the virus. Day 6, lockdown. It's crazy. This broadcast is being done from a secret location somewhere in the Front Range of Colorado. Can't tell you where because that makes it secret. This intro 110. We're talking chapter 9, punishment and sentencing. We're going to do this in 2 videos. So this first one will be a little bit about the punishment philosophies, 5 major punishment philosophies. And then the second one will be a little bit about some sentencing models. So that's what you have to look forward to. Understand that these are also have the accompaniment of the PowerPoint that goes along with the textbook. The PowerPoint is on D2L for your viewing and reading pleasure. So when we start looking at the 5 punishment philosophies, we got to know that each one of these is still used in a form somewhere in the United States and is used in a form around the world. This isn't stuff that is all historical and that people don't do anymore. We still do a lot of this, and around the world they still do things that we probably wouldn't put up with in this country. Know also that when you look at these punishment philosophies, we're looking at them from a theoretic and a theatrical or a philosophy standpoint. If you already looked at the remote access video, you know that there's also an accompanying discussion post for this chapter for this week under the activities tab in D2L, and there's an assignment in the same area. Next week is going to be exam 3. You'll take that through the quiz area. So let's get going on these punishment philosophies. There's 5 of them. The first one is going to be deterrence. Now, if I was in class, I'd ask all of you to raise your hand on whether or not you thought of committing a crime and then because of the penalty chose not to commit it. That's an example of deterrence. We do a lot of this, and it works great for law-abiding citizens. The reason none of us run out and run a bank regularly, rob a bank regularly, is because we don't want the consequence of going to jail or prison. That's deterrence. We look at the penalty as opposed to the gain that we're going to get from committing the crime, and we choose not to commit the crime. That's a deterrence. When you look at deterrence, there's 2 kinds of deterrence. There's general deterrence and there's specific deterrence. General deterrence is set up that we make penalties such that, in general, the society won't commit the crime because they don't want to pay that penalty. It's kind of a risk-reward punishment philosophy. We weigh the rewards as opposed to the risk of the penalty, and we choose not to do the penalty. There's also specific deterrence. That's a more case-by-case deterrence based on what will make someone who gets caught not do the crime again. And so now we tailor-make their punishment towards that person to say, what are we going to put in place to punish you, so the next time you'll look at doing that crime and say, I'm not willing to have that penalty come back on me, so I'm not going to do the crime. That's specific deterrence. So you have general, geared towards the general public, specific, geared towards that individual. The second punishment philosophy is the one that we use mostly in America for major crimes. This is called incapacitation. This is a sentencing punishment philosophy that says, once you commit a crime, we're going to lock you away in a remote location, separate you from society so that we don't have to deal with you anymore. Incapacitation. We lock people away in prison for a number amount of years, and we put these prisons in remote areas. In Colorado, we stick them down in Canyon City or in Florence or in Sterling, away from the general public. And with that, we say, we're no longer going to deal with you. All we care about is that you are now separate from society. We don't care if you get rehabilitated. We don't care if you change your ways. We don't care if it gets better for you or worse for you. The bottom line is we're just going to lock you away and put you someplace where we don't have to deal with you anymore. That's called incapacitation. That actually started in the old days. They'd actually put people on a boat and ship them to a remote island, or ship them from England to South Carolina or to Australia, and just dump you off and say, we're done dealing with you as a criminal, so we're instead going to put you away someplace. That's called incapacitation. The third punishment philosophy is one called retribution. I lost my place for a minute. Retribution is what we used to do when we punish people for punishment's sake. So this was shaming. This was torture. This was what they do in countries now where they stone you to death as a penalty, or they cut off your hand for theft. This is still a form of punishment used in America when you talk about the death penalty. Everyone always loves to cite, well, the death penalty is not a deterrence. It's never been set up to be a deterrent. It's been set up to be a punishment based on retribution, otherwise known as just desserts. We are punishing you for punishment's sake. We're going to make the punishment so horrific that we feel better about punishing you because we get retribution. You earn this horrible punishment, so we're going to give it to you, and we're going to feel fine about it because it's what you earned. That's called retribution. This is a punishment philosophy that victims of crime like. They don't care if you get rehabilitated. They want you punished because you violated them and you victimized them, and therefore they want you to be punished in a way that it's retribution. It's just desserts. It's what you earned. The fourth punishment philosophy is called rehabilitation. We love to think we're for this, and we should be for it. Well over 90% of people sent to prison will get out one day. And if we know they're going to get out, and we don't do anything about preparing them to come back to society and become a productive member of society, then we're really doing society an injustice, because we're setting this up to be that we're going to lock you away when you do get out. It's not going to be any better for us because you're not equipped with the tools. You have been rehabilitated to become a productive member of society. We love to say we're for this until we start putting programs in place. Usually rehabilitation programs are more costly and a lot of times they don't work. So when it comes time to redo them again, we're like, yeah, we're all for that, until we start doing it, and people are like, well, why are we spending the money on that? We say, well, let's raise your taxes to support this program. Most people say no. They're not willing to spend more on felons who committed crimes, especially if they were serious crimes, especially if they were violent crimes, to rehabilitate them so that they would come back to society. Supposedly they're better off. We love to say we're for it, but when it comes down to the actual funding of it, putting it in place, we're not for it. And so we don't do it. Some of these programs work. There's programs out there now based on cognitive behavioral therapy, based on risk rewards factors that are showing promise. We'll talk more about those in upcoming chapters, but we're not really willing to jump on board with those because, again, most of them are more expensive. Are you willing to pay more? Most people are not. The fifth punishment philosophy is known as restorative justice. It's covered more depth in future chapters. In the book, they like to talk about paying restitution, doing things like that. What the idea behind it is that you as the defendant, as part of your punishment, should try to make the victim and society whole again as part of your punishment. So you're going to pay them back. You're going to pay restitution. Maybe you're going to work with them in their business for free if you stole from their business. Maybe you're going to do something for society. Spray paint, graffiti someplace, get caught. We're going to make you come and paint the wall back over, covering up your graffiti. Those kind of things are our restorative justice, restitution-based punishment philosophies. They show real promise with younger offenders, non-violent crime. With adult offenders and violent crime, they don't show much promise. So those are the 5 basic punishment philosophies. If we were in class, we would go into them in more depth. But since we're doing this on a video, this is what you get. Stay tuned for part 2. We'll talk about sentencing models.